For 2 decades, the Rights and Resources Initiative has worked at the intersection of land, people, and power, amplifying the voices of Indigenous peoples, Afro-descendant peoples, and local communities as they fight to secure their rights to land, forests, and natural resources. Born from the idea that lasting change begins with those most connected to the land, RRI has grown into a global coalition supporting movements across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Their work has helped place community land rights at the center of climate action, gender justice, and environmental protection. To understand how it all began, we sat down with the people who started it. When a small group of activists and development advocates in Washington, D.C. came together with a big idea that securing local people's rights could change everything.
Kind of cut my teeth on what was going on in the world and so-called development and how it was not responsive, and I eventually worked at the World Bank. I worked with the Haitian government for a number of years while I was at the World Bank, and then that led me to other projects around the world where I saw this interface between people and forests was manifested different. Everywhere I went, I saw that governments were generally just ignoring local people. And that's what led me to leave the World Bank, and I eventually I was just tired of working in big bureaucracy, and I helped a fellow named Michael Jenkins start Forest Trends. So I realized that issue of Indigenous peoples and lack of recognition and support for them was a problem, a global problem. It really was everywhere, and that whether you cared about butterflies or biodiversity or poverty, that until you address this issue of recognizing Indigenous people's rights and who they were and supporting them, you weren't going to make any ground on solving any of these other bigger problems.
When I joined a national NGO in India which was working on forest and land, that was the first time I got exposed to the tribal population of India. And it's very substantive. People don't understand that there are more than 115 million tribal people in India. But when you go and look at them, the condition of their living, in excess, complete lack of access to their own resources, which is the forest, being completely circumcised by the rules and regulations, what you can do, what you cannot do. That was the first time I realized that unless these people have complete right on their lands and resources, nothing is going to work. I shifted to Washington, D.C., and I was fortunate enough to get few assignments from the Forest Trend and then a regular work with them, and met Andy and Augusta.
I'm an anthropologist. I got very interested in South Asia when I was an undergraduate, and I ended up deciding to go to anthropology studies for a master and a PhD. And I did my field research in Nepal. And I went to a area in the far west where there was a whole migration, rural to rural migration project going on. So I had some entries into a set of communities that were Kamugger, so they're Indigenous peoples. It was a very, very strong culture, very, very unique culture, but very poorly appreciated by the higher caste. And then I just got a bug of wanting to work on forestry, so I kept getting hired by the World Bank to go to India, to different states, and again you could see there was this big misfit between government owns the forest, government decides what happened to the forest, and then all these local people who've been using the forest, who live in the forest, and there was the beginnings of a movement for land rights. So we had a project in Honduras where we mapped with global environment money all of the land rights of the Afro-descendants and the Indigenous peoples along the northern coast of Honduras, of which there are just incredible number of communities. And then government changed and they didn't do anything with the study. So now you know who has all the rights and who should have them, and nothing's happening. It goes back to being a conservation project.
And we realized amongst our own discussion how inadequate current efforts are. And we thought that there will be a need for an initiative, and it will not be only us. We have to take several organizations, several individuals. We did a huge amount of consultations with them, but finally we took the plunge and started RRI.
You know, it was a hard thing to craft something that had not been done from zero, right? We were really fighting the battle of saying, how can we get people to pay attention to forests? How can we get people to pay attention to these stewards of the forests? So, you know, we talk about timing is everything, and I think what, to me, the launching of RRI in those early days was really about was you can create your own timing. You can create your momentum to make the timing happen.
From those first conversations in Washington, D.C., RRI has become much more than an idea. It has grown into a network of partners, communities, and movements, reaching across continents and cultures. What began as a question, how do we shift power and challenge the status quo, has become a global effort, visible in forests, managed by communities, policies shaped by grassroots voices, and the daily work of those determined to protect their home.
When Andy, the founder of RRI, was leaving, and the recruiting firm contacted me and said, well, your name was coming over and over as we are talking to people. Do you want to apply? I want to give it a try because I know that I knew this coalition and I worked for this coalition for 10 years. And I was like, well, this could set a precedent because if I get this job, I want my brothers and sisters, mainly my sisters in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, to know that, look, they can get into this position and they can get it there, but they can do the work very well. The key strengths of RRI as a solidarity network have been for RRI to be an incubator, an innovator, instigator, but also a convener, bringing unlikely allies and building strategic alliances. And I think that has been what has led RRI.
For 20 years, RRI has partnered with communities, supporting local leadership and advancing rights from Africa to Asia to Latin America. These are the voices and places strengthening movements and reshaping land and resource governance on their own terms. Together, they continue to show what's possible when communities lead.
At ILEPA, we have had a very thriving relationship with the Rights and Resource Institute. We started back, I think, in 2016 when RRI came in through a modality known as a strategic response mechanism. It was a land grab moment when thousands of acres were grabbed. So we managed to gather all the necessary evidence, the demarcation records, the maps of our land, the green cards documenting how this land is allocated. And this evidence became a very powerful tool. 6 years of land rights struggle, a court decision was made that was very groundbreaking. All the lands that were grabbed were reverted back to the community. Titles illegally allocated were cancelled and reallocated to the bona fide members.
Desde la Coordinadora de Mujeres ha sido como el espacio de poder encontrarnos con RRI. Desde Amarí hemos recibido estos grandes apoyos, que es la Asociación de Mujeres Artesanas en Verá, de poder seguir trabajando nuestro empoderamiento económico a través de los conocimientos, de las artesanías, a través del rescate de nuestra soberanía alimentaria con el sistema tradicional propio de nuestro pueblo, que genera no solo alimentos sanos, sino también reivindica conocimiento en jóvenes, en mujeres, en niños, porque es parte de la colectividad, es parte de esa complementariedad que se necesita para poder avanzar.
I remember in 2009, I think, we get support from RRI for Indigenous Youth Leadership Training. I think that is the first time we have direct support from RRI for this kind of activities. And it was really important because until today, the result of that training, many of young people who joined the training now become leader in Aman as an organization in their own community as well. So it was very important for us. That also set the first ground for Aman in developing our youth program.
Con RRI para ONAMIAP ha sido muy importante porque en ese entonces, en el año 2014, había poca cooperación que querían trabajar con mujeres indígenas. Entonces, ONAMIAP es una organización nacional que trabaja, que visibiliza el rol de las mujeres indígenas en el territorio. Entonces, es en ese sentido que ha sido muy importante la articulación, ¿no? Aliarnos, ser parte de RRI, porque nos ha permitido también llegar al territorio, mirar, visibilizar sobre todo la importancia del rol de la mujer dentro de la defensa territorial.
In Gabon, an RRI project has been helping the Masaha community protect its territory through a combination of ancestral knowledge and scientific research by creating a community-conserved area on their sacred forest. They call it Reserve of the Children of Masaha.
L'État gabonais ne voulait pas facilement nous attribuer cette bourse et il était question que nous-mêmes, on essaie un peu de trouver les voies et moyens possibles pour prouver à l'État la richesse qui est là.
Parce que toutes les activités liées à la sécurisation, comme les patrouilles communautaires, la recherche, comme la cartographie, comme la collaboration communauté-administration, entreprise et NADA bien sûr. Et l'administration est favorable à ce que, au lieu d'aller vers l'agrandissement des parcs étatiques qui existent, il faut aller plutôt vers une approche communautaire et ça ne se disait pas avant. Pour moi, c'est une très grande victoire, ce qu'on est en train de faire ici, pour les communautés de Massa et toutes les communautés du Gabon.
Nosotros queremos hacer las cosas de una manera distinta, estableciendo entre Clarify y las organizaciones de pueblos y comunidades, los gobiernos territoriales, un diálogo donde se establecen cuáles son las prioridades en el territorio, cuáles son los tiempos de los procesos, de manera que aseguremos que el financiamiento llegue lo más rápidamente posible, lo más directamente posible y con mecanismos de transparencia y equidad.
खास गरेर यो सामुदायिक वन उपभोक्ता महासङ्घ नेपाल देशभरि रहेका अहिले करिब 23,026 सामुदायिक वन उपभोक्ता समूहमा 32 लाख घरधुरी छन्, जसले 24 लाख हेक्टर वन व्यवस्थापन गरेका छन्। पछिल्लो चरणमा युवाहरूको बिस्तारै उपस्थिति कम हुँदै गएको सन्दर्भमा हामीले योभन्दा 1 वर्ष अगाडि नै आरआरआईको सपोर्टबाट हामीले कार्यक्रम अगाडि बढाएका छौँ र युवाहरूको बारेमा पनि हामी चाहिँ नमुनाको रूपमा हामीले आरआरआईकै सपोर्टबाट छलफल चलायौँ र हामीले हाम्रो साङ्गठनिक नियमावलीमै एक महिला एक पुरुष युवालाई ल्याउने व्यवस्था त्यो हाम्रो थिएन।
आरआरआई आफैले आफ्नो स्ट्राटेजी बनायो हैन, वुमेनहरूलाई कसरी चाहिँ लिडरसिपमा ल्याउने भन्ने हिसाबले उसले सुरुवात गरिसकेपछि हामी पार्टनर संस्थाहरू नेपालमा जति पनि छौँ पार्टनर कोलाबोरेटरहरू उहाँहरूको चाहिँ क्यापासिटी बिल्डिङमा हैन महिलाहरूलाई चाहिँ लिडरशिपमा ल्याउनको लागि क्यापासिटी बिल्डिङमा चाहिँ आराधना गरेका छन् हैन कम्युनिटी फरेस्ट्रीमा चाहिँ हिजो चाहिँ यसको लामो हिस्ट्री छ वुमेनहरूले चाहिँ प्लान्टेसन गर्ने नेचुरल फरेस्टहरूको प्रोटेक्ट गर्ने जुन कारणले गर्दा आज हामीले यत्रो ग्रिनरी देखिराखेका छौँ यसमा ह्युज कन्ट्रिब्युसन वुमेनको छ भनेर उहाँहरूले गर्नुभएको कामलाई चाहिँ एउटा रेस्पेक्ट गरेर ग्लोबल प्लेटफर्ममा चाहिँ यसलाई पुर्याउने काम पनि आरआरआईले एउटा सानो निन्द्रामा बिउजायो तिम्रो रूपैले।
Ce qui a été important, je dirais le point le plus important, a été la capacité de RRI à produire des études pour soutenir l'argumentaire des communautés, l'argumentaire des organisations de la société civile. C'était d'apporter un pourquoi à ce combat-là. Pourquoi faut-il reconnaître les droits des populations locales et autochtones sur la terre et les ressources? Quelle est la situation réelle? On avait l'impression jusque-là que c'était une discussion, je dirais, de salon. Mais quand on a des chiffres, quand on a des données précises, bien documentées, cela permet d'avoir un plaidoyer beaucoup plus facile. Je crois que ça a été l'élément le plus important que RRI a apporté à la discussion dans les premières années.
In Latin America and the Caribbean, Afro-descendant peoples form 24% of the total population. They have been fundamental to protecting the region's vast biodiversity, yet their rights and contributions have long been ignored and suppressed. For over 15 years, RRI has worked with grassroots organizations to document Afro-descendant territories and collect data to inform policymakers of their vital role in conservation and climate action. One such organization is the Process for Black Communities in Colombia.
El proceso que venimos junto con RRI es la creación de áreas de conservación propias para el pueblo negro, es decir, salirnos un poco del establecimiento de las dinámicas del Ministerio del Medio Ambiente o de las corporaciones regionales para el caso de Colombia.
In the last 13 years, RRI has facilitated a coalition of 18 grassroots organizations from 10 countries to uplift Afro-descendant peoples' voices in global climate and conservation discussions. As a result of this work, in 2024, the UN recognized for the first time Afro-descendant peoples as key actors in its framework on biodiversity conservation. RRI's work continues, community by community, country by country. Across continents, as local leaders continue to fight for their rights and resources to build a more just and sustainable future for our planet, RRI's mission remains clear: to support the leadership of communities, especially of women and youth, amplify their movements with research and innovative tools, and continue to show the world that land, rights, and opportunity must remain in the hands of those who know them best.
We're living in a new context and we need to adapt. And I think RRI has been really good into reinventing and rethinking all the time. That's why we have this 5-year strategic plan, updating it all the time. We have this national country annual planning meeting to make sure that we can really understand the moment and react to the moment while also having this clear vision moving forward.
May we embody the 7 grandfather teachings in our work together to enable Indigenous peoples and local and Afro-descendant communities to reclaim our lands and strengthen our capacities so that we can build our communities based on our own priorities, ancestral and traditional knowledge, sustainable land and water stewardship, and respect for our rights. To cherish knowledge is to have wisdom. To know love is to know peace. Respect is to honor all creation. Respect is humility in action. Courage is to face challenges with integrity. Honesty is to be sincere and to recognize equality. There is no living thing lesser or greater, and so we treat all as our sister or brother. Humility is to know that we're each a sacred part of creation, and truth is to know all of these things and to live them. May these teachings guide us. Gebej Gumen, we are all one.